I made an intervention, and for that intervention I was arrested.
Tonight, members of Camp Cloud protest at the Vancouver courthouse for what they say are unfair arrests.
If you ever tell anyone about the things I have done to you, I will find you and I will kill you.
And an Alberta man tells his story of how he was abused in foster care, but pushes on to help others. Good evening, I'm Dennis Ward. One of the teen girls who pleaded guilty to manslaughter in the beating death of 19-year-old Serena McKay was sentenced today. Brittany Hobson was at the courthouse and has reaction.
It was an emotional day in a Winnipeg courtroom as a judge handed down a sentence for one of the teens involved in the beating death of Serena McKay. The teen pleaded guilty to manslaughter in January, and the Crown was asking for an adult sentence of 7 years, while the defense was asking for a youth sentence of 3 years. The judge ultimately decided to side with the defense and sentenced the teen to 2 years in custody and 1 under supervision. Serena McKay was 19 years old at the time of her death. Her body was found outside a home on Saugeen First Nation in Manitoba in April 2017. The beating was filmed and posted online and shared through social media like Facebook. 2 teens who were 16 and 17 years old at the time of the attack were arrested. The 2 cannot be named because they were underage at the time of the attack. The Crown argued the younger of the 2, who is now 17, acted as an adult. The judge said while the acts were horrific, she didn't believe the teen had the moral capacity of an adult. The teen has been in custody since last April, but will not receive credit for time served. The second teen pleaded guilty to second-degree murder. She was sentenced in June, and she was sentenced as a youth. She received 40 months in custody and 23 months under supervision. Dolores Daniels was in court every day throughout these proceedings, and she submitted 2 victim impact statements where she talked about how losing her only daughter and losing her best friend affected her and how she was having trouble healing. She was outside the courtroom today and talked about how justice was not served for Serena McKay.
And I just have no faith anymore in the system. They did us wrong today, and they continue to do us wrong with everything that happened with this whole case. I hope that it brings some type of action or something against this whole system.
Brittany Hobson, APTN National News, Winnipeg.
We'd like to hear what you think. Here's how to continue the conversation. Send your emails to news@aptn.ca. Find us online at aptnnews.ca and on youtube.com/APTN News. Also, you can follow APTN News on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram for more Indigenous news. Camp Cloud held a press conference early this morning in Vancouver outside the Provincial Court of British Columbia. One of the water protectors that was charged last March made her first court appearance today. Tia Chikomi was charged on March 21st during a protest for assault and mischief. Water protectors say they're upset with excessive violence used against Indigenous women land defenders. They also want to know why the driver of a Kinder Morgan truck that apparently struck individuals at the protest was not charged.
Saw the truck ram into the bodies of these people, and I made an intervention, and for that intervention I was arrested. The truck driver was never even questioned. The truck driver did not even get a ticket. Why would I be arrested and the truck driver nothing?
We have to take a quick break and then a story of survival. Stick around.
I'm Todd Lamarand, and coming up later, I went to the Friendship Flotilla in Ottawa between police and Indigenous youth. It's the 18th year, and it looked like it was going to be the last. Find out why organizer Linda Kitchakizek was going to throw in the towel, and the last-minute life-saving event that changed her mind.
Behind them.
Here's a look at Friday's weather forecast, starting on the East Coast. 27 in Fredericton, Charlottetown, and St. John's. 20 for Nain, 22 in Happy Valley, Goose Bay, and La Grande River. 25 for Saguenay and Quebec City, 23 in Chibougamau, 28 in Montreal. In Southern Ontario, a warm day, 28 in London, Toronto, Peterborough, and Ottawa, 30 for Windsor. In Northern Ontario, 22 in Thunder Bay, 20 in Wawa, 25 for Sioux Lookout. In Northern Manitoba, 27 for Puckatawagan, 25 under the sun in Churchill, 27 in Winnipeg, 30 in Brandon, 29 with sun in Dauphin. In Saskatchewan, those 29s continue in Swift Current, Regina, and Estevan. 25 in Buffalo Narrows on Friday, 29 in Stony Rapids.
Welcome back. An Inuk woman from Inuit territory in Quebec has been found after having gone missing in Montreal for over 5 days. Many say the reason she went missing is due to police neglect. Tom Fenario has the story.
It was nearly midnight on a Friday when Mina Kuliak was released from this police detention center. They gave the 48-year-old Inuk woman from the community of Umiak in Nunavik a public transit ticket and sent her on her way. Suffering from mental health issues and with an arm in a sling, Akuliak was in an unfamiliar industrial area. She then went missing for 5 days.
She has been found, and she is safe and sound. She was found in the north end of the city.
Police say Akuliak was taken into custody for being violent and inebriated at the hospital where she was receiving care for multiple injuries. Injuries she suffered back home after being hit by a Kativik regional police car. While friends and family breathed a sigh of relief at her being found, questions remain about why Akuliak, who speaks only Inuktitut, was left to fend for herself.
I was angry in my mind. My question was, why didn't they bring her back here? Because she has a broken arm. She doesn't know Montreal.
When you talk about Indigenous people falling through the cracks, this is a perfect example.
As executive director of the Native Women's Shelter of Montreal, Naguset is upset for several reasons. In July of 2015, she signed an agreement with Montreal Police to improve relations and services between police and the city's Indigenous community. One of the key points was the procedure that would be followed when an Indigenous woman goes missing. The procedure, put into effect this past May, states that a designated frontline social worker from the shelter will be notified when a woman disappears. Naguset says they found out days after Kulavik went missing, and not from the police.
I am so glad she's safe. Whew. It's the best scenario, but there's still a lot of work to do, right? And people need to be held accountable for their behavior.
Montreal police say that before releasing someone from detention, their obligation is to make sure the person is not a danger to others or themselves, and that they are looking into the circumstances that led to Akulivik's release.
Every operation where things do not go, let's say, 100%, we'll try to improve, but at this point, it's way too early to say that things were not done properly.
Montreal's Indigenous activists disagree, and their relationship with police, which once looked to be on the upswing, appears to be deteriorating as a result. Tom Fenario, APTN National News, Montreal.
A survey by the Department of Justice shows changing attitudes on how justice is administered. According to the Canadian Association of Elizabeth Fry Societies, the results are encouraging. Cassandra Churcher is the organization's executive director. She joins us from Ottawa. Cassandra, thanks for joining us. What are some of the highlights of the report that you see as most promising?
There's 3 key points that I think that we should all really be focusing and talking about right now. The first is Canadians have spoken. 74% of them prefer community-based options over incarceration. Community-based options being probation, fines, community service. That's one key factor. The second key point that we should be focused on is diversion. That's alarming. 79% of Canadians would like to see other other Canadians diverted from the trial system, the court system, the terrible remand system that keeps the accused in jails and prisons for months at a time. And the last key point that I'd really like to talk to you about today is that 90% would like to see a return to judicial discretion, and that addresses the mandatory minimum penalties. Currently, Senator Kim Pate has Bill S-251 up on the Hill, which would do just that. So this last finding from the report that Justice released is really critical because it provides public endorsement of what Bill S-251 is trying to do.
One of the things the report points out is that 3/4 of Canadians believe diversion would be more effective. What would diversion look like?
Diversion means that you can avoid the trial, court, and remand system. You can go into counseling programs, you can do community service, you can meet with community justice committees, you can meet with the victim. There are just alternative means to administering justice from that traditional remand center, trial, decision, prison model that I think most Canadians are used to.
As we know, there's a high rate of Indigenous women in the prison system. How would these types of changes impact Indigenous women?
Well, this is what we needed. We needed the public to go on record to say we need to stop incarcerating Canadians, particularly Indigenous Canadians. When it came to diversion, 55% of Canadians said that this seemed like the most practical way to address the over-incarceration of Indigenous people. So now it's just a waiting game to see if the government is going to address what the Canadian public has now endorsed.
And how hopeful are you that these changes will actually come to fruition?
Well, I think that's why this Justice Report and Survey is so important. We have the commissions, we have the reports, we have Status of Women that were released to a report just this June. We have Truth and Reconciliation demanding the decarceration of Indigenous peoples, but nothing's being done. Now, at least, we have the Canadian population in huge numbers saying, look at community options, look at diversion options, try to start the decarceration process. And so the political will and the moral courage are the questions that we're all waiting for answers on.
Sandra Churcher, an important report, and we will all be looking to see if those changes come. Thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
Now, the story of a young Alberta man who survived abuse in the child welfare system and is fighting to have a life. And to do so, he wants to help other people who might have experienced the trauma he faced. He told his story to APTN's Chris Stewart.
Stephen Morin has a story to tell. He's had hard times, and he struggled with drugs and depression. Now, Morin is writing a book about his life.
And I've had many moments where it nearly broke me. Like I was on the verge of suicide. Many moments in my life. And it's been years since then. The last moment happened, and I'm stronger than ever this year, and I'm on top of the world. Damn right.
When Morin was 4 years old, he was put into the foster care system. Morin says John Edward Beaver, the boyfriend of one of his foster families, sexually abused him on a regular basis. He says he was threatened by the Beaver to not tell anyone. After 5 years of abuse, he changed foster homes, and the abuse finally stopped.
The last time I seen him in person, he told me in the shower as he was doing his last whatever you want to call it on me, and after he was done, he told me, and I quote, this will forever be engraved into my memory, and I quote, "If you ever tell anyone about the things I have done to you, I will find you and I will kill you."
Over a decade after the abuse, Morin applied as part of a class action lawsuit on behalf of victims in protection of child welfare. Not long after, Morin saw his abuser's face in the newspaper and on television.
I first saw his photo on the Edmonton Sun, and that was big. That was really big. That was, it was a series of emotions after seeing that photo for the first time.
Police are looking for a man who's wanted in connection with a string of sexual assaults. There are 13 outstanding warrants for 53-year-old John Edward Beaver.
John Edward Beaver was arrested in Edmonton a week later. Beaver was charged by the Edmonton Police Service with multiple charges of sexual assault. Stephen Morin was just one of at least 4 alleged victims. He says 2 other foster children were abused by Beaver in that same foster home. John Edward Beaver died in his sleep in August 2014 while out on bail, 7 months before he was scheduled to face his charges. Stephen Morin eventually received a $35,000 settlement. He was one of as many as 4,000 youth who received a settlement from the Alberta government for being abused in the child welfare system from 1966 to 2008. APTN asked Morin if he had a message to a child who was being abused.
I would tell him to don't be afraid to fight back. Don't be afraid one bit. Doesn't matter if they're your parents or your sibling, doesn't matter who it is. Don't give up. Don't let them do this to you. Run out of the front door and yell, scream, bloody murder, rape. Don't go back there. Do whatever you can. Flop around. Make them put you in a straitjacket if you have to. If they have to. Like, don't go back willingly. Don't ever go back to something like that because you don't deserve that.
He says he is now strong enough to relive his past and put it down in writing for the world to see. He hopes to have it finished next year.
I come to think of it nowadays and I think, wow, after the system, leaving the system at age 16, that's a lot right there. So half of the book is, like the beginning is the growing up in the system, half is growing up out.
Chris Stewart, APTN National News, Enoch, Cree Nation.
Quite a story. It's now in its 18th year, but Ottawa's Friendship Flotilla is in danger of not seeing a 19th year. That story's coming up after the break.
Here's the rest of Friday's weather forecast, picking back up in northern Alberta. 29 for Fort Chipewyan with some rain. 27 in rain in Fort McMurray. 29 in rain for Medicine Hat. 22 in Calgary, again with showers. On the west coast, 21 in Vancouver and Campbell River. 20 in Bella Coola. 19 for East Lake. 26 under the sun in Fort Nelson and Fort St. John. In Whitehorse on Friday, 22 in Dawson, 19 for Mayo with rain, 19 and mostly sunny in Whitehorse. In NWT, 16 in Wrigley with rain, 18 in Norman Wells, 24 for Fort Liard and Trout Lake, plus 6 in Sax Harbor, plus 7 in Pawlatuck, 14 in Colville Lake. In Nunavut, 10 for Chesterfield and Repulse Bay, as well as Cambridge Bay. On Friday in Iqaluit, it'll be 7, same as Igloolik, plus 4 in Arctic Bay and Clyde River.
Welcome back. It's a simple premise. Stick cops and Indigenous youth in canoes together, and a better understanding of each other will be the result. But it looked like Ottawa's 18th annual Friendship Flotilla would be the last, because as APTN's Todd Lamoran reports, ill health walloped the event's founder and main organizer.
The middle of a pedestrian bridge is a great place to get shots of the Friendship Flotilla as they paddle down the Rideau Canal. Out of nowhere, Linda Kitchikisik shows up and does an impromptu webcast.
Behind them, we have the Ottawa Police, and they're escorting the last canoe. And here we have, wouldn't it be people? I don't even know who it is. Okay, but these are our paddlers. I can tell by their blue shirts.
Hey!
Kitchikisik is one of the most upbeat and energetic people you'll ever meet. Although the idea for the flotilla began after a racist incident.
Years ago, a police officer off duty spat in my face, but he knew I was Native and I knew he was a police officer, and he said a few things that gave me to believe that he was pretty racist. I could have, started a war, and then we could be like cops against all the Native people, and we could all be angry at each other, and I was like, you know what, I gotta get in there, I gotta work with them, I'm gonna teach them to love us because we are so lovable.
And to do that, she uses magic canoe therapy. Police and Indigenous youth pair up for a 2-hour trip down the Rideau Canal to Victoria Island on the Ottawa River.
I don't do anything. I literally don't even give them a lesson. I kick them off the curb, throw them in the friggin' canal, and I let the canoes do the rest. And then by the end of it, they are literally breathing and paddling in sync.
This is Sergeant Chris Hernshare's second year.
It's very positive, and I heard very good things about it, but I never participated in it before, so it was really, and frankly, I'm sorry I missed a lot of ones because it's an awesome event, yeah.
He paddles with Veldon Coburn and his adopted daughter, Napachi, whose biological mother was Annie Pudagu. Over 2 years ago, he made racist comments on Facebook about Pudagu after her body was discovered in the Rideau River. The flotilla is just part of his journey of redemption.
Certainly, I think any more bonding with things that you don't know as much about, and you have misunderstandings about, or you have stereotypes about, or you're racist about, I think is better to improve yourself.
Cree Angela Fox lives in Ottawa, but is originally from Thunder Bay. She'd like to see this event happen there.
Cops get a really bad reputation in Thunder Bay, and if we're going to move forward as a country, I think Indigenous people and the police and, the system in general, we need to work together.
For the first time, Kitchikisik gets everyone to make their own medicine bags before the start. She'd been too ill to do it herself. Her kidneys have failed.
Because now I'm on dialysis and I know how really difficult it is. I'd really welcome a kidney. Save me.
It seemed hopeless until very recently because she's a 60s scoop adoptee. But a newspaper article led to a biological brother contacting her the day before the flotilla.
But I also didn't expect anybody to actually come forward. I mean, how would you ever ask, hi, I'm your long-lost sister. Chances are you're a match for me. Could you give me a kidney, please? I just would never, never.
But he has made the offer, and Kitchikisik is determined to see a 19th flotilla happen.
I mean, I'm not planning on going anywhere now. I'm fighting.
Todd Lamran, APTN National News, Ottawa.
Great idea for Thunder Bay, and we hope that Linda sees that 19th flotilla as well. That's your APTN National News for this Thursday. For news anytime, visit our website, aptnnews.ca. APTN Investigates is up next. I'm Dennis Ward. Have a great night. We'll see you back here tomorrow.
Yusuf!
Nice. Okay.
All right, so am I going in the back? Because I think this is the front. This is the back?
Yeah.